From the team behind the award-winning documentary She, welcome to She Goes by Jane. I'm your host, author, and poet Amy Baker.
And I'm Vanessa Ciccarelli, photographer and independent filmmaker. At the end of this episode and every episode, we will be joined by a special guest who will read an original poem by Amy Baker about the women we're featuring. This episode features author and new media creator Paige McKenzie.
Hey, Vanessa.
Hi, Amy.
What do you know about Atlanta?
I guess not a whole lot. I feel like I should know more, but I don't.
Okay. So when I say like Atlanta bombing or Atlanta child murders, like nothing.
No, maybe like the bombing, but not the child murders.
Okay. Today we're going to talk about Mary Shotwell Little, who you've not heard about.
I have not heard about her. No.
Okay. So this is a fresh story for you. So her case is one of the biggest cases in Atlanta's history. But today, her story is largely forgotten. And I really wanted to highlight her today so that we can bring this back up and hopefully maybe something connects with someone and they remember something they didn't before. So Mary was a young woman. She was 25. She met up with a friend out for dinner at a newly opened shopping complex. And they said goodbye at the end of their evening together, and Mary went missing from that point.
Okay. So the last time she was seen was at that shopping mall?
Not exactly. So we're going to get into that because her story's a little complicated and twisty. But first, I wanted to tell you a little bit about Mary before that point.
Okay.
So she was born in 1940. Kind of like what sounds like a typical like middle class white working family in the South. They lived in Charlotte, North Carolina. She was really active in her high school experience. Like she was in like beauty pageants and was her high school's mascot. So she like literally wore a horse head. And,
really?
Like, yeah.
Aw, I like Mary.
Yeah. So she had like a Mustang head that she would put on. Millie
She
the Mustang.
sounds fun.
She does sound fun. And she wanted to go to college. So she went to what is now known as the University of North Carolina, Greensboro, which was women's college at the time. And so she went to college there to become basically educated in like administrative and secretarial skills.
Okay.
She had a dream of moving to New York City. Have you ever wanted to move to New York City?
No.
No.
Not personally. No. That's kind of outside my realm of anything comfortable.
So she really wanted to move to New York City, but her parents were like, hey, New York City has a lot of crime. And, there's like this perception of New York City as being like crime-ridden and like
so scary.
So scary,
yeah,
particularly in the 1960s. This like pervasive belief of New York City is like not a place you would send your young daughter. So instead, they kind of compromised together and she moved from her home to Atlanta.
Okay. And the parents thought that was safer than New York?
Yeah. So at the time, like Atlanta was not the Atlanta we know today. It was much smaller, kind of like a major city in the Southeast, but not quite like the Atlanta of now.
Okay.
Yeah. Atlanta had a huge growth spurt, and so she's moving there before that time.
Okay. So still a quieter kind of city?
A quieter kind of city, yeah.
Okay.
Or like that's like their belief.
Their belief.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
So she moved in with some roommates. She's working as a secretary, and that's kind of like where her story like kicks off. While she's there, she reconnects with a childhood friend. So she had previously lived in Georgia and her family had moved to North Carolina, and these two were classmates together. So this is where she meets Roy Little Jr. And they meet through mutual friends, and it's like they're going to get married.
Okay.
Yeah.
So her childhood friend is the one who introduced them?
So like he was her childhood
friend. He
friend.
Was her childhood friend.
Yeah.
Oh, that's cute.
Isn't it?
It is.
Yeah. So she, like through 1964, 1965, like Mary kept on returning to her hometown to be basically a bridesmaid in a ton of her friends' weddings, like, which I think like says like a lot about who she was.
I think
Like,
so.
yeah, so she's bridesmaiding, and then eventually she's having her own bridal showers, and she gets married to Roy in September of
Okay.
1965.
She's in Atlanta still, married to her childhood sweetheart, and they both moved there separately and got together there.
Yeah,
That's pretty cool.
yeah. So
Oh,
he's also young. He's in the Army Reserves. Um, he's also working in the banking industry. And that's like the start of their life together. And like 6 weeks after they get married, she goes missing.
6 weeks?
6 weeks.
Oh, they barely even got to have a marriage.
Right. Yeah.
Oh, that's terrible.
Yeah.
Okay, tell me more.
Okay. So the week that Mary goes missing, her husband is out of town on business. He's about like an hour and a half away. And they check in during the entire week that he's gone. So she's calling him in the evenings, they're chatting, and she's very excited that he's going to be home at the end of the week.
Okay.
So, one of the things that she does is she decides that she is going to go out to dinner with her friend Isla Stock. They work together. So, she drives from her work at Citizens and Southern National Bank to Lenox Square. So Lenox Square is like what is like a massive shopping complex for the time. It's brand new. They're building it as like this popular destination. Their tagline is "See you there at Lenox Square." It's a happening place. So she goes there after work on a Thursday, and she then does some grocery shopping because she's buying groceries for a dinner party she's having over the weekend. She's going to have some friends down. Her husband's going to be back. They're going to have like a little dinner party at her house. She also buys a few other things at the shopping complex with Isla. They also have dinner together at like a cafeteria there.
Okay. So shopping and dinner.
Shopping and dinner. So they walk back towards the cars and, say goodnight to each other because Mary says that she has to get home because she's got these like perishable groceries in her car.
We've all been there.
We've all been there. Yeah. So she's going to do that. Isla leaves. Everything seems fine. The next morning, Mary does not report to work.
Okay.
And, one of the things that we're going to talk about kind of often in our podcast is like that actually is like one of the like first clues that something is wrong is when someone doesn't show up to work when they're otherwise very dependable. So her boss is immediately concerned because that is not like Mary at all.
It's not in her character.
No. So he is calling everywhere. He gets in touch with her husband. Her husband says like, I don't know. I haven't heard from her. He calls her landlady who goes and checks on their apartment. The newspaper is out front. Like it doesn't look like anyone has been in there.
So it doesn't even look like she's gone home.
No.
Okay.
Calls the police, right? And they learn that she's gone to this shopping center the night before. They like scour the parking lot for her car. So there's not this like delay time between like realizing something's wrong and like getting police interested in this case. They are immediately interested in this case.
I hear of so many where they're like, they wait. How come they didn't wait with her?
I think she has some things going for her in terms of getting police interest. She's a white woman,
Okay.
newly married. Her boss is concerned. Her family members are concerned. So you've got all these
Comes
like
from like a good background.
a good background. And
Okay.
you can't see us, but we're like doing big air quotes around good background,
Yeah.
right? So they're immediately invested in this case. They're looking for her. And at first, there's nothing. They're not seeing anything. So in the afternoon, though, they locate her brand new 1965 Comet around noon in the parking lot.
Did they check earlier and it wasn't there and now it's there at noon?
Yes.
What happened? We don't
We
know.
don't know. We don't know what happened.
Okay.
So they look and they say it's not there. And then later
It
they
is.
say it is there.
Okay. So now I'm wondering if is it overlooked? Did somebody pop it back into the parking lot?
Right. So this Lenox Square parking area, like it is massive. So like the whole like complex area is like I think 60 something acres. So it's not like
So it's easy to overlook maybe
it is
a car in a first search, especially if other cars are parked there.
right. But they speak to the Lenox Square kind of like security people because it sounds like Lenox Square has its own like mall security team.
I bet they do.
Right. And they say, or the guy working there says, there were no cars parked here overnight except for one vehicle, and it was not hers.
Okay. So at least
Um,
they know that much.
yes. And they do check out that other vehicle, and it turns out it was like someone who was about to get their car repossessed and was hiding it at the shopping complex, so nobody picked it up. But her car, he says, was not there.
Okay.
So they take this car and they are immediately looking it over because there is blood inside.
Okay.
So there's some blood on the windshield, some on the seat. Her groceries are still in the back.
I was going to ask that.
Yeah. They find her stockings kind of rolled up in between the seats.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So they find like her undergarments. She was wearing a green patterned dress. She was wearing like a London fog coat. She also had a handbag. Those items are not found,
Okay.
but the rest is in the car.
Okay. So this is not looking good.
It's not looking good. In fact, Clinton Chafin, who's kind of leading this case and does so for a good long time until he retires much later, is at the time he said it looks very, very bad at this point.
Yeah.
Yeah. So one of the things they do in this early investigation is they look at the odometer on the car. So they're trying to determine what might have happened. Where has this car been in that
Okay.
weird gap? So I had to ask some friends about this because, like, this kind of accounting has not been in my existence or probably in your existence.
Right.
But
Like, what is that? Like, how would they know what the number would have been
right.
before she arrived at the shopping mall as opposed to
Yeah,
when they found the car?
exactly. So apparently, it was very common practice, particularly in early car owning days, to really be like tracking your mileage.
Really?
Yeah,
It just seems funny to us now, I think.
right.
Yeah.
Because, like, I can't tell you what the mileage is on my car.
No, I couldn't.
And I was just in it like 10 minutes ago,
Yeah.
right? So they are able to determine based on the mileage that there's essentially 40 miles that are unaccounted for on the car.
I'm finding this impressive that they can, like,
This is what they've come up
figure
with.
that out because I don't know if you could do that now.
Like, I definitely could not.
No.
So what they decide is that, like, obviously if the car's been driven 40 extra miles than it should have been. And they did this calculation also using, like, what her husband's last mileage check was. They shared this car and calculating in how long it would have taken for her to drive from her apartment to work throughout the week and then her apartment to the shopping center. And then, like, what's the excess miles left over?
Okay.
So they decide that there is 40, and so that must mean that the car was driven 20 miles in one direction and 20 miles back. So that creates a search radius for them.
Okay. So we have a 20-mile radius.
Yes. I mean, I would like to state that I've been thinking about this case a lot, and like this does not account for, like, what if she just like went for a joyride in
Right.
her car like throughout the week? Like,
Exactly.
yeah,
And it doesn't mean 20 miles. Like, I mean, I guess the 20 miles would be the max.
right.
But,
Like, are there other factors you could consider
right.
there?
So, I mean, but if she did do the joyride, then that radius would be shrunk. So I
Right.
guess it doesn't hurt to search within this
It's
20
20
miles.
miles. So they start looking for her within a 20-mile zone of Lenox Square. They are searching streets, they're searching like backyards, they're asking hikers to look for her. They call in some like Army reserves. They're asking pilots, like, can you keep an eye out on this area just to see if they can find Mary?
So this is pretty extensive now. Like,
Yes.
yeah.
And this happens relatively quickly.
Right. I just feel like there's probably so many other women disappearing at Atlanta at the same time, and this kind of effort is probably not going there.
Yeah, I have some thoughts on this, which we're definitely going to get to.
Okay.
So her family comes down from North Carolina to her apartment, and they basically set up camp in her apartment with her husband, and they're just all waiting for the phone to ring so they can find out some news. The initial theory is, of course, that she's been kidnapped.
That seems like
Yeah, so there's
from the car, that seems like the right direction, right?
right because there's the blood in the
Blood,
car.
the clothes.
Yeah, the clothes. There's some grass as well, like stuck
Okay.
to the blood. There's some stuff going on there. They don't have like the DNA matching that they have now, but the blood type matches her blood type, so it's like seeming like it's her blood. But there's not a ton of blood. Later reports say it's like kind of the amount that you would get if you had like a bloody nose.
Okay, so it's minimal blood. And it does just seem weird. If you were kidnapped, you wouldn't think that the kidnapper would return your car to where they found you.
It's a little bit weird.
That's weird.
Like because then the question is like, why?
Yeah.
Why do that?
It's like a very organized person wants to put things back in place.
Maybe.
I don't
I don't
know.
know. I don't know. Roy, her husband, says stuff like, we have a lot of hope right now. The police think she's alive, and we do too. All we want for her is to come back alive. He also says, this is like somewhat, not that any of these things are truly amusing, but this one struck me. He really focuses in on the fact that her purse is missing.
Okay.
He says, a pocketbook is a thing a woman wouldn't go without, and no man would be caught with.
What?
Yeah.
Okay, I feel sorry for him because his wife is missing, but at the same time, that's a weird thing to say.
Right?
That's weird.
Yes.
Yes. So like a man can't carry a pocketbook and a woman's like whole life revolves around one.
Right.
Okay.
Okay. So, the search in the first month is pretty intense and yields nothing. Like there are plenty of people calling in constantly saying that they've seen her. There's a few hoaxes involved that really like don't amount to anything, but it's like essentially people saying like we've seen a note from her or whatever, but like none of those pan out and Mary's still missing. At some point the police are like, we just like don't have much to go on.
Right. Right. And the husband was definitely out of town?
Yeah, so he was definitely out of town at this convention.
Okay.
Now, like, could he have like driven from the convention back, like done something? Yeah, but like that it does not seem to be the case here.
Okay. And nobody's even thinking of him at this point.
Right. Like,
Okay.
yeah. One thing that does come out is that she seems to have received some roses in the weeks before her disappearance at her workplace.
From her husband?
Some say that the tag said secret admirer. Some say there was no tag, but like it definitely didn't seem like it was from her husband because reports are that she took the roses and threw them in the trash.
Okay. And this was while they were married. So in that
Yes.
short, like 6 weeks of marriage, somebody else sends her roses at work or somebody that she didn't want the roses from.
Right.
Okay.
Yes. And on top of that, someone who is going to the bank for a job interview says that they overheard her on the phone talking to someone saying, like, you can't, like, I'm a married woman now.
Okay. So this seems like maybe there was something going on for a while where somebody was after her, like in the
in the mix.
Okay.
there. So there does seem to be like something happening with that.
Okay.
But they find the florist that the flowers came from. That person's like, I don't know who sent them. That lead does not pan out at all.
Okay. It's like in the days before, like tracing everybody on their cell phone.
Right. Like, what was everyone doing?
Right.
Yeah. I mean, Atlanta at this time, like, there is a lot going on. There are women who are reporting that there's someone who's been breaking into their apartments. So there's just like this like overarching sense of fear, particularly for young single working women living in the city, which is a fear that we kind of see replicated over and over and over, right? So detectives are going like full on this. They're working like 16 to 18-hour days, following up every lead, even the most like ridiculous ones, and there's nothing there. They do test the car for fingerprints, and they get like 40 to 50 prints out of the car.
Are they all hers and her husband's?
So here's like the ridiculous thing. So if you look at the kind of the history of proper evidence collection, police should have been wearing gloves long before
So you
this.
don't think the police were wearing gloves that day when they found
There
her
are
car in the parking lot?
there are photos of them in
With
the car without
okay.
gloves on. So they actually have to like compare it to like police to rule out that those aren't police officers' fingerprints all up in the car.
They would have saved themselves so much time.
I just put on some gloves.
Right.
Right. They did have them. They just, yeah.
Didn't do it.
No. No.
Now they have more work.
Now they do have more work. At this point, police start kind of grasping at straws.
Okay.
A crime against a woman in the Southeast like could not occur without police being like, maybe that's connected to the Mary Little case. So I mean, like, there's crimes happening in Houston, Texas, and they're immediately there. Like, could this be connected?
So anything that's a crime against a woman at this point now, they're connecting back to Mary.
Right, and a lot of those cases only make the news because
of Mary.
Oh. Right.
Okay.
So we know about a bunch of those cases because they're publicized broadly as police are looking into it to see if they're connected to Mary. So then those don't lead anywhere. We're now months out. So we're into like November when the police get their first break in the case.
Okay. And when did I forget which month she disappeared?
October.
Okay.
So I guess not months. A month has passed before they like truly get a lead. So right now in our lives, we make a credit card purchase and it's immediately logged. Like you could follow us throughout our everyday lives pretty easily by following our credit card receipts throughout the day, right? In the 1960s, it's a much slower process. So receipts are processed at a slower rate.
And they can't make that quicker for something like this?
Well, in this case, they didn't know. So let me explain for a second. So on the date of her disappearance, she goes missing October 15th. We know she's last seen at Lenox Square at 8 p.m. So between midnight and 2:30 a.m., her credit card is used at an Esso service station in Charlotte, North Carolina.
Oh, okay.
We've started off at Atlanta and we've ended up in her hometown.
Okay.
They only know about this because basically someone is like at their desk a month and a half later or so and sees like the bill come across their desk. The like carbon copy of the receipt that has her name on it.
So that happens, do we say the same day or the day after?
So this is like the night of.
The night of. So there's the gas station. And how far away is that from where she is?
It's a multi-hour drive.
Right. So it's not like the capacity within that, the extra mileage of the car.
No.
So it would have been done without
her car.
Her car.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So we're well
So
aware.
either she or somebody else is using her card in another state.
Right. But we don't know about this, or police don't know about this for like over a month later.
Okay.
What they do is they go and question the service station attendant, Daryl Thomas, who was there the night that the car pulled up. Back in the 1960s, full service gas stations were much more the thing. So someone would have come out and gassed up your car for you. So he says he does remember Mary Little,
Okay.
that she was in the passenger seat, that she was laying down,
Okay.
that there was blood on her head, and that there was a man in the driver's seat.
Okay. So is this why he remembers it? But at the same time, he wasn't alarmed that night?
He was alarmed,
He was. Okay.
but he didn't tell anyone.
Oh, okay.
Right. So it's also important to note that like this still happens today, this kind of like cultural response, but basically particularly in the 1960s, like something like this, like seeing a bloody woman in a car with a man, the assumption is that's his wife and that whatever is going on is between the two of them.
It's personal.
It's personal. It's their business.
Okay.
So he's not going to do anything because that's between the two of them. But he remembered it because it's a bloody woman. She didn't
Right.
say anything, but she is the one who signed the credit card receipt because it was her card.
Okay. So we know she was alive at that point.
Yes. Not long after, they also find another credit card receipt from Raleigh, North Carolina, that was the next day. So October 15th into October 16th.
Okay.
And that was like used in the afternoon, also signed by her.
Okay.
So we've at least traced her through Charlotte, North Carolina into Raleigh, North Carolina.
Okay.
Yeah. That person also says they remember her. But you know, now we're a month out from those people seeing her.
Right. Right. And was that the last time that anyone saw her? Was the
Yeah.
signer?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And the credit card also? That was the last of that?
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's the last moment. And like, you know, so police don't know it. It's like a month-old lead at that point.
So their search area at the beginning was just for nothing. It
Right.
seems like we should be searching
Further
elsewhere.
out.
Yes.
Yeah. There have been a lot of theories over the time. You know, some of those are that she was kidnapped, some that she like was kidnapped by like maybe a high school sweetheart, or maybe someone else did it. There's also like a lot of more contemporary theories. I think as police got frustrated with the case and things were not resolving, so they started to say things like maybe she just ran away on her own, maybe she was unhappy in her marriage.
I feel like when you run away on your own, you don't do it with blood on you.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
There's probably no violence involved.
But they say like maybe she staged it to look like a crime scene.
She could have, but and then it seems like one of those high school sweethearts or somebody else be missing as well.
Right. Like what's the
Somebody else would have to be missing, or somebody at some point would have to have seen them together.
Yeah. And so like, you know, her friends, when they talk about her relationship with her husband, there's some divided things. Like some apparently said that they didn't like him very much.
Her husband?
Yeah.
Oh, really? Okay.
And there are other friends who are like, look, she was like a happily married newlywed, like doing newlywed stuff. You know, she was planning a dinner party for her friends. And so would you have gone and purchased all of the stuff for a dinner party if you were planning on disappearing?
No, but I mean that goes into the same theory of like you would somehow make yourself bleed to make it look like
Right.
a disappearance. Like maybe you would stage a dinner party the same way. But
Yeah.
It just seems like none of that makes any sense. Like
Right.
she was obviously just interrupted somehow from whatever it was she was trying to do.
Right. So, you know, I think with the increasing frustration of like every year passes and this case is not closed, like added to that level of frustration. And then there's like what happened to Mary. But one of the other things that did happen around this time is another woman goes missing very briefly, but she's found murdered. And this is Diane Shields, 22, of East Point, Georgia. And the reason I'm bringing up Diane Shields is that she took Mary's job at the bank.
Okay.
So after Mary goes missing, Diane Shields is the new Mary.
So that just seems like a
Creepy?
bank connection.
Right. Also, Diane ended up living with some of Mary's old roommates from before she got married.
Wait, this is getting very strange.
The real piece of evidence that people were like panicking about as well was that Diane was sent 5 roses
Seriously.
from an anonymous sender, just like Mary had been. In this case, they are actually able to trace that the roses are just from like a family that Diane babysits for. So,
Okay. So those aren't.
right. But like the connections here are pretty stunning. So Diane is found murdered. Her body is in the back of her vehicle. It's hard not to think of them together, but police have said that these cases are not connected at all. That it's just like really like large coincidence that ties them together.
There's some really big coincidences there, though, to
Mm-hmm.
not even try to connect. Did they try?
I mean, I think maybe. I don't know. I don't know.
I'd be afraid to get a job at that bank after.
I personally would not be working that bank. There are some differences, like her purse is found intact, like all that, and the fact that she is found.
It is different, but at the same time,
Yeah.
it just seems really strange.
Right, and they never solved Diane's murder either.
So both are unsolved. Both worked in the same job at the same place. And both hung around with the same people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think as well, like there are likely that these cases suffer from some like rapid assumptions, right? Like the first assumption that Mary had to have been within 20 miles and like confining the search to that area.
Right. It's likely that the car stayed confined to that area, but that does not mean Mary stayed confined to that area.
Right. Right. So like concentrating their efforts in this like 20-mile radius for a good part of those early critical hours and days, you know, it's not like anyone was like, where else could she have been?
Right. And because they had the body in Diane's case, did they spend as much time trying to work through that, or was she almost overlooked in a way?
Yeah, I mean, Diane's case fizzles out much faster than Mary's. So
Okay.
Mary's story lingers and it was brought up consistently year after year after year. You can kind of trace like newspaper reports throughout like the 60s and 70s. It kind of fades away once the 80s and 90s and 2000s hits. Largely because like the investigators originally working her case start to retire
Right.
and this becomes like their one unsolved case. So in their retirement notes for a lot of these original investigators, like this case is brought up. But you know, it's important to note that this was one of the biggest cases in Atlanta. There were boxes and boxes and boxes of evidence that no longer exist. They are not there anymore. They are missing. And now like Mary Shotwell Little is largely forgotten. one of the things is like I keep on going back to like her parents saying like, no, you can't go to New York City.
Right. And she would have been probably so much safer there. Like,
Right. Like you can't go to New York City and Atlanta is safer. Now, like, okay, crime statistic wise, like
right.
Atlanta was safer at that time. Um,
But that,
but I'm just like struck by like they sent her in a place that they thought would be safe.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, that's what we all do for our kids, right? We
Right.
try to choose those things, and it doesn't always happen as planned.
Yeah.
That's very sad. So, Amy, do you think that Mary's case will ever be resolved? Will we ever find out what happened to her?
I think that's the like I believe in like lingering hope, right? The belief that like something could still happen. You know, her parents throughout their entirety of their lives, they believed that like something would be resolved and that they would find out answers at some point. Um, you know, the investigators in her case like always hoped that something would happen. You know, and even into the like late 80s, early 90s, people were still calling in saying like I think I saw something happen. Could you investigate this to see if this was Mary?
Okay.
So, though those, you know, leads didn't resolve, they didn't yield answers in her case, like there are still people who remember her and who are actively trying to think of ways to like bring her home.
One way or another. She might be. I mean, there's no evidence that she's not alive, right? So, one, or is there?
No, I mean
No.
I think, you know, there's two quotes that kind of sum up the different feelings about this case. One is Jack Perry, who had been an investigator, and, you know, he says, she stays with me all the time. If I were to walk up on her skeletal remains today, I would know her. I know her likes and dislikes. I know everything there is to know about her, but where she's at.
Mm.
And then another detective, his perspective is different. He says, this is John Cameron. He says, based on my experience in these cases, I simply don't believe she's dead.
Okay. So there's still hope for Mary.
Right. So I think there's like two of these broad perspectives on like maybe what happened to her. But either case, there's still hope that it'll be resolved in some way.
What about her husband? Is he still alive?
He is.
Okay. Does he still have hope that she's alive?
I don't know. He has been resistant to communicating with news reports, which is understandable if so much of your early life was dominated by this major story about your missing spouse. You know, would you necessarily want to talk about it so many years later?
Right. Did he hold out hope and stay like alone for a long time, just waiting for her to come back?
So he received what is known as a Mexican divorce,
Okay.
which is
What? He divorced a missing girl?
yeah, it's actually in the 1960s, getting divorced was really hard, particularly getting divorced from someone who is missing and therefore can't participate in the divorce was like going to be next to impossible. So, a Mexican divorce was literally people going to Mexico to obtain a divorce.
But why would that be necessary if the person is missing?
Well, because like he can't get remarried if
Okay.
he's still married. So,
Okay.
even though she's missing and not there, they are still legally married.
Right. Okay. I
Yeah.
it's sad.
It is sad. So now there's like, you know, processes in the United States, like after a certain amount of time, someone's declared dead, which enables the spouse to,
Right. I just don't it just seems
yeah.
like that would be a lot because say your husband went missing
Hmm.
and years have passed and you're still married. It would be really painful to divorce that person. It would feel like you're doing something wrong at that point, I think, to divorce them just to be able to be remarried. So it would almost be good if, like, after a certain number of years, that dissolved somehow.
Like naturally on its own,
Naturally on its own, so then you
rather
can
than
be,
having to like
instead of
legally
feeling
do
like
it.
you're betraying your lost loved one. That's awful.
So he, you know, he ends up getting a divorce, and he does remarry about 2 to 3 years after her
So he
disappearance.
clearly thought she was not alive anymore.
I think for him, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't imagine what that's like. They had just started their life out together, and suddenly she's gone. Like all those plans that they had.
Right.
Yeah,
Right. I'm glad that he was able to carry on with his life, but it's just the divorce part feels sad.
it does feel sad. Because it does feel like you're saying, like, I'm here and I'm saying through this that I don't expect her to come back.
Right.
Yeah.
Now we are going to listen to Amy's poem, Cynosure, read by Paige McKenzie. Paige McKenzie is a millennial hyphenate, a New York Times best-selling author, YouTuber, actor, influencer, creator, artist, and producer. Her first book series, The Haunting of Sunshine Girl, was on the New York Times bestseller list for over a month. She is a founding member of Coattails Productions with 3 projects in active development. Paige lives in Portland, Oregon, with the love of her life, an 8-pound chihuahua named Pongo.
Cynosure. Mary Shotwell Little, 26. Missing since October 14th, 1965. From Atlanta, Georgia. He gives her red roses stripped of thorns, delivered in cellophane that crinkles in her hands, while she looks for the note that reads, "Secret admirer." He gives her his body pressing against hers, pressing against her car, his hand cupping her mouth, his voice in her ear asking if she recalls what it felt like when he ran his fingers down her neck. He gives her a cheek pressed against dim gray upholstery, her groceries rolling around the back seat, clashing into her legs, her scarab bracelet callousing her wrist. He gives her the sparkle of mile markers, a way to count the distance from her husband's hands. He gives her a green sign that announces her hometown, and because the morning sun scorches the letters, she cannot see the name, but she knows where she is, remembers the curvature of the road, the dips and rises that announce lovers' lanes, the cobbling together of buildings along the skyline. He gives her the ticking of a streetlight outside a gas station where she gets out to use a restroom, while he and the attendant holding a greasy rag watch her stumble in her bare feet, blood twirling around her knees. He gives her the percussion of rain on her body, the rivulets of water down her collarbone, the float of crisp red leaves against her wrists and across her back, the hush of roadways. He gives her the joining of body and ground.
For more information about our show or to check out other shows on the network, please visit evergreenpodcast.com. Bye, Vanessa.
Bye, Amy.